we got to start with COP26. And I know for folks who are watching the Majority Report, they had our friends on from La Ruta del Clima talking about sort of the feelings that people were having and the kind of early analysis. So we won't go over everything that's been happening, but I just wanted to note, a couple things up top. One, as you saw earlier, we have Sleepy Joe there, who is very happy to sort of bask in the limelight. Though he's not too interested in what's actually being said there when he is off camera. And, what we're seeing so far is a lot of pledges, which is pretty much what these massive climate change meetings have led to. Is a lot of pledges, right, without any kind of actionable mechanisms to make sure that there's compliance with these pledges. I mean, the fact is as we've mentioned when we had Sam Goodman and Adrian on the show, we were talking about the fact that, celebrating the fact that they've done this 26 times is not a positive thing. It shows that very, very, very little, unfortunately, gets done. And the big talk so far has been about these methane plans. I don't know how familiar you are with them, Matt, but basically, the pledges that we've got from around 20 countries is that these countries will reduce their methane emissions by 30% of the 2020 value by 2030. And again, as we've seen from Paris to Copenhagen, a lot of times these pledges might seem very massive going into it, but when it comes time to sort of look at how serious these countries were at enforcing it domestically, there's a very, very different picture, which I think is notable, especially since, Joe Biden has tried to take such a lead here. In this, this conference so far.
Yeah, I mean, I remember he would just say things in the campaign a lot, like, I'm the most environmental guy out there, I'll do the most. And it's like, no. I mean, ultimately, he's going there and complaining about gas prices and falling asleep. You want to say something about that?
No, I mean, I wanted to highlight again for folks who are maybe watching this later, somebody who did show much more courage and tenacity during this meeting, who was Mia Mottley, who's the Prime Minister of Barbados, a nation that is very, very threatened, certainly as we all are, by climate change, but it is in this very, very difficult position of not being one of the most powerful nations there, one of the nations that has the most resources at their disposal to, one, just cut things back to be able to sort of reduce emissions. But she certainly has the courage of somebody who wants to fight for a better world. And I know Michael was somebody who was very impressed by her for a long time. So I just want to share a little bit from her talk, her speech, because I think it really does highlight the severity of the moment.
The leaders of today, not 2030, not 2050, must make this choice. It is in our hands. And our people and our planet need it more than ever. We can work with who is ready to go, because the train is ready to leave. And those who are not yet ready, we need to continue to ring circle and to remind them that their people, not our people, but their citizens, need them to get on board as soon as possible. Code red to the G7 countries. Code red to the G20. Earth to COP, that's what it said. Earth to COP. For those who have eyes to see, for those who have ears to listen, and for those who have a heart to feel, 1.5 is what we need to survive. 2 degrees, yes, SG, is a death sentence for the people of Antigua and Barbuda, for the people of the Maldives, for the people of Dominica and Fiji, for the people of Kenya and Mozambique, and yes, for the people of Samoa and Barbados. We do not want that dreaded death sentence. And we've come here today to say, try harder, because our people, the climate army, the world, the planet, needs our actions now, not next year, not in the next decade. Thank you.
And she's certainly correct there. And unfortunately, what we've been seeing from the Biden administration, who is probably one of the most important people listening to that speech right there, and just to note that Sleepy Joe happened earlier in the conference, not directly at that speech, but no less despicable, because in the speech where Joe Biden was dozing off, it was a youth climate activist talking about their needs for the future. So it's no more despicable that Joe Biden had no time or attention for them. But I wanted to note that, like, this is one of those moments where just moving past the kind of, so obviously so much of the discourse around climate change in this country is about pushing back against the climate change deniers, right? The GOP. But I'm sorry, this kind of dedication to these failed policies, to these failed systems that we're seeing the vast majority of modern day liberals attach themselves to, and most certainly Joe Biden, is just as much of a climate denial. The fact is that the plan that they've put forward to deal with climate change in the United States is nowhere near adequate. And I noted this yesterday during my stream, but I want to note it again, that it's very much connected to this old failed neoliberal free market mechanism for how we're going to deal with climate change. So this is from Matt Huber, who again has a book coming out, which I'm very excited to read, Climate Change is Class War, coming out in May 2022. He notes here that out of the Build Back Better bill, around 86% of all investments in the energy sector are tax credits, $320 billion, meaning we still have to just hope the private sector achieves the necessary decarbonization. Sunrise Movement made the CCC, the Climate Conservation Corps, the center of their demands. It gets only $30 billion, or 9% of the tax credits, right? This is inadequate. This is denial. And the belief that the same kind of system that got us into this mess in the first place is going to be what gets us out is absolutely delusional. I noted, so I saw earlier today, Kate Aronoff, who's been at COP26, noted that I think it was BP, British Petroleum, one of their executives was using the terminology of the just transition to talk about oil company profits in the near future. So we are already in a dire moment where, look, our opponents are sort of getting well versed in saying we care about climate change, we care about all these kind of things. And we're even seeing some action from governments, but it still is tied to this market logic, which got us into this mess in the first place. And that system is very, very easy to exploit. I just wanted to note really quick on coal, something that, Biden, has been a a pretty strong booster of, frankly, throughout his political life. Right. This is in this plan, again, that we're fighting to make sure it even gets through in its current state, right? Like, there's a fight to make sure that even these kind of inadequate proposals get through in their current state. But note this is in Bloomberg today. Biden's carbon capture plans holds lifeline to coal plants. Coal-fired power plants would be eligible for billions of dollars in extra tax breaks under President Joe Biden's economic legislation if they install carbon capture systems, an incentive that environmental groups say may delay the retirement of dozens of facilities. Power plants that capture their carbon dioxide emissions would be eligible for a tax credit of as much as $85 per metric ton under the draft of Biden's $1.75 trillion spending plan released by the House last week. That's an increase from a rate of $50 a metric ton in current law. The change could result in a single 1,000 megawatt coal plant receiving $6 billion in payments over 12 years, according to analysis of the proposed credit by the environmental group Sierra Club, which estimates the increase could result in a quarter of the nation's coal fleet delaying retirement. You bake the shit in, to this kind of, this market incentive plan, right, for how we're going to deal with climate change, and you leave the door open for the same systems, for the same people and the same organizations that have driven us into this moment of crisis, you're giving them an opportunity to continue, one, polluting the planet on the taxpayer's dime. I mean, this is the kind of big brain shit that we're getting from these people, right? So I'm sorry. I hate to sound cynical, but I don't really believe what I'm seeing or hearing coming out of these international conferences about how serious the United States is about dealing with climate change today.
Yeah, I mean, carbon capture would be cool if it had been proved at scale to actually do anything, right? Like, I'm not opposed to that, but like they talk about it as if a giant breakthrough has been made, and no, this is still just basically a waste of money and a way for coal companies to extend their lives longer, right? Like,
and that's frankly what a lot of, unfortunately, people call it greenwashing. Like, a lot of the people who are in the room and making decisions are people who are trying to find nice little golden parachutes for these same industries to continue. I don't know. Before we go to one of the greatest thinkers of our time and their sort of pushback against the climate science, I don't know. Did you have anything else that you wanted to know before we move on?
No, not really. I just say one thing I think that's just interesting is, because I'm keyed into it because of our talk with Sam and Adrian, with the component of, even Ben Shapiro is talking about, okay, we need to adapt and mitigate a little bit, right? But that he's saying we need to do that, and then the next breath saying, but these people are asking for money. It's interesting to know like which way those things are shifting, right? Because I think Ben's like top guy on Facebook. He has some sort of coordination with reactionary politics and globally, right? So I think that's interesting. That hopefully that's a good sign that they're getting a little bit anxious, that maybe some of the right sorts of questions are starting to bubble up a little bit. But I mean, it's not super apparent at the sort of heights at this moment.
I mean, for me, what I see is more, of I don't know, trying to signal that they get it and they see it, but not a lot of, because I'm sorry, at the end of the day, these are extremely powerful companies that make a lot of money. And there's a shitload of money invested in the continuation of us drilling for more oil, something that Biden has encouraged countries abroad to do this week. There's so much money that's invested into these systems. And when you have money invested in these systems, I mean, this is capitalism 101, right? You want to have a return on your investment. And until we start to deal with that engine and that mechanism, we're not going to get very, very far. And that's why it's just sort of, this is obviously a very alarming moment that what we're seeing, but I just think it should make it very, very crystal clear. If you're still on the fence, thinking that we're just going to be able to reform our way out of this, if we can just sort of like do some tweaks on capitalism, the climate crisis really sort of blows up that entire debate, because there is not a mechanism in the system that will allow us to decarbonize without radically reducing the profits of these companies that are at the very top of this society and this system that we're living under. And we need to start having the confidence and the courage to start coming at them directly and pushing for political solutions to it, because this kind of idea that we're going to get market fixes and we can all sort of come together and sit at the grand table of humanity and solve this, I think it's becoming very clear that's not going to be the case.
Yeah, and it's interesting, just like in what's the big science-related social movement that sort of lived on the internet, was that whole "I fucking love science," right? Mm-hmm. And it really is gearing people up to like be like, when they say science, it means like the new products from Apple and shit like that, right? Like it very much became this sort of fetishization of capitalist innovation. And it sucks. It's the exact same shit. The way that they were worshiping the like sort of lords of industry 100 years ago, right? Like just a complete perversion of how shit gets done, just because they managed to I guess, monopolize all of it. But
hell, I mean, we're seeing everyone's favorite boy, Bill Gates, showing up again at this conference. Somebody who's very much, been a leader in the refusal to move and to do serious action on this. It's just for some reason still being included.
He's busy.
Being included in these conversations of like global weight and like incredible importance for human history. Let's get the jackass from Washington State to come here and tell us what he wants us to do.
He's going to go from education in America to birth rates in Africa to the pandemic to farming. I mean, take a fucking vacation, Bill. Like, relax a little bit, buddy.
And Bill, I would have a little bit more respect for Bill if he took the Jordan Peterson round. I just have to share this because it's so good, Matt. I know some people might have seen this, but Jordan Peterson, has come out of retirement or hiding, and is now back to weighing in the most important questions of our time. Which I don't know, Matt. I don't want to put you on the spot, but you might be able to read this better than me.
It says, let the climate change modelers model the future price of a single stock for 5 years for 1 year. But the entire climate was... Okay, sorry. But the entire climate is everything for 80 years? So...
It's too much. I don't know how people still respect this guy's intellect, but beyond it, I mean, the argument here he's making is obviously clearly absurd. To act like these things are...
Well, it's also mathematically illiterate to the extent that I understand. It's easier to model these things on longer time scales than shorter. But
also, I'm sorry, like the difference between climate and the stock market is like the stock market essentially being a barometer of investor confidence, right? And the success of like the American system of finance, right? Much less so what climate is, right? Which is actual moving things in the physical world and physical reality around us, right? I mean, it's just... it's absurd, and I don't want to bore everybody with it, but it is very fun if you go and find that tweet. There are some Bitcoiners who are trying to like go Jordan Peterson into coming in and sort of saying that he thinks Bitcoin will be necessary to fight climate change.
It's called stake coin, and you get a stake coin every time you order a steak at a new Michaela Peterson branded steak restaurant.
But they don't realize that Jordan Peterson doesn't believe that climate change is a real thing. So you can't really get him to say that Bitcoin's be a solution to that if his whole thesis is denying climate change. I don't know. I just think this is a good example of, the fact that there are a lot of charlatans out there, despite the fact that we might think that the right wing is moving. I mean, there is still a very, very powerful movement trying to continue to deny and delay and to run interference for these companies.